The offseason can unfold so many different ways for the Lakers. I wanted to do an episode about LeBron's discount that we keep hearing about, what's going to happen with Austin Reeves, and all the different scenarios that this team may potentially be dealing with. The interesting thing about the Lakers is there's a lot they can do, but they're not really in control of their outcome. They're in a lot of ways just going to be sitting back and waiting to see which of their options become available to them. And so in this episode, I'm going to explain what it means to classify yourself as a cap space team versus an over the cap team, what that means for their targets in free agency and in trades. And then we'll go through a few scenarios involving those targets and how they would be able to acquire certain guys. So let's start with taking a look at their current picture with their cap holds. You have Luka at the top of your pyramid making $49.5 million. Austin Reeves is on a $20.9 million cap hold, which is extremely important, and you don't see it very often. It's unique for a player to have this low of a cap hold and to be expected to sign a contract with a $40 million annual value. We'll see what contract he ends up with, but that difference in your cap hold versus the contract that he's ultimately going to sign means that you're going to keep that $20.9 million cap hold as long as possible. The last thing they're going to do in terms of sequence is give Reeves his contract, because once he signs that contract, that 20.9 number jumps to 40. So they're going to wait on that. The opposite is true of LeBron. He has a $59.5 million cap hold. And so if they're going to operate as a cap space team and have any cap space to absorb players via trades or free agency, that 59.5 number needs to be resolved down to 25, 20, whatever his salary ends up being. Until he does that, they will not have cap space. You have Rui Hachimura at $27.5 million cap hold. Similar to LeBron, that's a number higher than he's going to make when he signs his contract. He's expected to be somewhere around the $20 million per year range. I've even seen some projections that he could be a mid-level exception, which is 15 million range. I think he'll be somewhere in the middle there, but point is at $27.5 million cap hold, you're going to want to give him his contract early as well so that you can bring that number down to the $17, $18 million range that he's expected to get. And then that trims 10 million off your books right there. DeAndre Ayton has a player option. You'll see why this is a potential monkey wrench for the Lakers this offseason. That $8.1 million number could eat into their cap space, and so I would expect them to look to dump him on somebody if he opts in. But expectations out there are that he's going to opt out and look for a multi-year deal. I think he should opt in. I think getting $8.1 million is pretty good for him. I don't know who's offering him a multi-year deal for more than that, but we'll see. Marcus Smart also has a player option for 5.4. He's expected to opt out and look for a multi-year deal in the $10 to $12 million annual range. He is looking like he's not going to be available to the Lakers. We'll see. They don't have any bird rights on him. The most they could offer him is 120% raise on what he was making. That translates to about 6.2 million that they can offer him. That's well below that 10 to 12 million range that he's expected to be able to get. So the Lakers face an uphill battle when it comes to him. Luke Kennard has a $13.2 million. They have Jake LaRavia on the books for $6 million. It's an expiring contract. Jackson Hayes, $4.5 million cap hold. This is interesting as well. He's been on their team for a couple of years now. So if he re-signs with the Lakers this upcoming season, that becomes his third full year with the team, meaning the Lakers get full bird rights on him, and they can give him any size contract they want after this season. Because he's expected to want to do everything he can to stay with the team, earn those bird rights, and cash in next summer, we could potentially see them renounce that cap hold and have him come back at the veteran minimum. I think they're going to try to give him that $4.5 million number, but just something to look out for if the Lakers end up needing an extra few million in space. They may ask him to take the veteran minimum and give that back to him when he re-signs with the team next offseason. Jared Vanderbilt at $12.4 million. I've always liked Jared Vanderbilt. He's a good player. He hasn't really found his way with this JJ Redick-led Lakers team. He's more than likely going to get traded. Nick Smith Jr., he's a guy I expect them to waive with a $2.5 million cap hold. Reason for that is there's no reason to carry the cap hold when it comes to him. You can re-sign him at the veteran minimum, which will be right around that $2.5 million number anyway. Dalton Connect at 4.2. Similar to Vanderbilt, hasn't really found his way with this team. I expect him to get traded as well. I think Vanderbilt and Connect, plus however many picks, is going to be the primary trade package they go out looking for an upgrade with. Ado Thiero, he kind of came on late toward the end of the season, on the books for $2.1 million. He's 22 years old. We'll see what happens with him. I could see them hanging on to him as well. And then lastly, there's Bronny James at $2.3 million. Obviously, I don't expect him to go unless LeBron is also going. And then they have a pick this year toward the end of the draft that has a cap hold of $3 million. I expect them to move that pick as well. So that's what the books look like right now. And you can see all of those numbers add up to just under the second apron. Now, that's because of LeBron's giant cap hold of $59.5 million. How much of a discount he's going to take all depends on what they're actually able to pull off. And I'm going to show you that here. So when you look at these numbers in a table, you see that all of their required money on the books, Doncic, Reeves, LeBron and Hachimura, Vanderbilt, Aravia, Dalton Connect, Bronny James, Ado Thiero, those are the contracts that are on their books, or in the case of Reeves, LeBron, and Hachimura, guys that you'd expect them to want back. After that, you have the cap holds that they could reasonably waive all these guys. Ayton, Smart, Kennard, Kleba, Hayes, Nick Smith Jr., and their first pick this draft. The required money adds up to 184.3, with the cap holds being what they're at. Optional money, 56.9. I know there's a lot of NBA fans and Laker fans that are calling for them to just let LeBron walk, but I would caution that kind of attitude because LeBron is still a top 10, top 20 NBA player. I don't know why you would just willingly like to see him walk away. For the right price, makes sense. But I have that being $25 million. I think that that's a fair compromise for both sides. LeBron's ability to earn real money anywhere else in free agency is basically capped at the mid-level exception. Even going to a place like the Warriors, it's going to be hard for them to add him at the mid-level exception and stay under the first apron. Any team that uses the mid-level exception is capped at the first apron. LeBron just doesn't have a lot of options to go anywhere else. Even a place like Cleveland, he would have to get signed and traded to. Cleveland would have to get under the first apron and be able to build out the rest of the team staying under it. They were the most expensive team in the league last year. That's going to be really hard for them to pull off. The avenues just aren't there. But you also don't want to disrespect what LeBron is. He's still one of the best players in the game. Asking him to take $15 million or less is pretty unreasonable to me. So I think $25 million is fair. And that's also because I think being an unrestricted free agent this offseason kind of hurt his flexibility. I don't really know what they were thinking with him opting in rather than doing another 1+1. Because as I said with Cleveland, in order for him to go somewhere, it's a sign and trade and you get the first apron hard cap that you have to deal with. If he had a player option that he were opting into and being traded instead, you wouldn't be dealing with that hard cap. He could have opted in and then been traded to Cleveland for Strus and Jared Allen, for example, something like that. I expect him to sign a 1+1 this offseason, and $25 million is a very tradable number. He can play this season with the Lakers, and then next offseason decide, do I want to retire? Is there another place I want to go? If he wants to go to a place like Cleveland, he can opt into $25 million, and all Cleveland has to do is send back matching money, and you're good to go. That flexibility, I think, would appeal to LeBron's. And then Rui Hachimura at 17. I've seen reports of him at the mid-level. Like I said, Rui Hachimura is really good. I think the Lakers would be really hurting if they lost him. I've seen that some fans like the idea of sign and trading him. He's a big forward that is a decent defender and shoots the three really well. You're going to have a hard time finding somebody who has the profile to contribute to Reeves and Doncic the way he does. I think they need to do what they can to keep him. So I think 17 is a realistic number for him. With the standard 8 to 9% raises from year over year, a 4-year, $77 million deal could put him at 17. I think that's a very good number for Rui. So then you have the rest of the contracts on your books. And I have 3 placeholders added here at the bottom of this list showing their available cap space. The reason for those placeholders is the NBA requires that you carry 12 paid slots on your roster at all times. You can't just wipe out every contract to create as much cap space as possible. They require you to add a placeholder with the absolute minimum salary you could potentially pay a player, and that's 1.4 million. They would have 9 contracts on their books. They would need to account for 3 more placeholders to find their real usable cap space, which in this case is 21.4 million. So it's interesting that unless they let LeBron go or they let Rui go, they're looking at just over 21 million. Let's look at the assets that are in the air for the Lakers, as well as the targets that they're going to be interested in. From a pick perspective, after the draft, they'll get access to the 2033 pick, so that's huge. They can offer a swap in 2032. They have their 2031 unprotected, swap in 2030, and then they have their pick this year. So they can make a pretty sizable trade. If their targets are modest, they could even split those assets into 2 trades. You have the cap holds of LeBron, Hachimura, Reeves, Kennard, and Jackson Hayes. You have the contracts on their books of Vanderbilt, Laravia, Connect, and Thiero that could all be moved. And then you have one of these exceptions available to you. It's either going to be the room exception or the non-taxpayer mid-level exception. The room exception is 9.4. The full mid-level is 15. And then lastly, you have player options for Ayton and Smart. As far as targets, I have 4 trade targets here. Herb Jones, we've heard plenty about that. Daniel Gafford, who I think is very gettable for the Lakers. Lou Dort is a target. He has a $17.7 million team option. The Thunder, without having their sheet in front of me, are roughly 20 million over the second apron. They're going to get more expensive from here on out. They're not going to be over the second apron this season. Dort has become less important to them. I expect them to opt into that team option and then look to flip him for as little salary in return as possible. They're not just going to decline that team option. I've seen some people suggest that. They're not doing that. They can pick that up and move him for a future pick. And then we've heard a lot about Nick Claxton. He would make a lot of sense for the Lakers. Free agent targets, you have unrestricted free agents Keon Ellis, Robert Williams III, Mitchell Robinson, and Ayo Dosunmu. And then lastly, the restricted free agents, Tari Eason, Peyton Watson, Walker Kessler. You can see from all these targets here, the Lakers are looking for 1 rim running big and 1 to 2 defensive-minded wings. I actually think those 3 restricted free agents, the guys they're really targeting, I think it's unlikely they get any of the 3 of them. Everything that I've seen that's been said about the Rockets, the Nuggets, and the Jazz is that those teams 100% are committed to bringing those guys back. So now that we've established their assets and their targets, let's talk about whether they're going to classify themselves as a cap space team or an over-the-cap team, because there's some big differences. Let's talk about being a cap space team first. That means that you are going to acquire players using your cap space, just signing them to your cap space, an offer sheet to a restricted free agent, a sign and trade, or even just a regular trade, but you're giving up less salary than you're taking back. All of those use your cap space to acquire talent, and that takes the mid-level exception away from you, and you get the $9.4 million room exception instead. To pursue this path this offseason, they have to deal with all of their cap holds. LeBron and Hachimura, those contracts have to be settled in order to bring their cap holds down. Those things have to happen in conjunction with the moves they're going to use their cap space on. And I say in conjunction because they can come up with these moves they're going to make in principle and then come to LeBron and say, here's what we're going to do and here's the number you need to sign for in order for all of this to go through. They don't need him to commit to any number until they know exactly what moves are going to happen. So that is true of signing free agents into open cap space, making trades like Lou Dort or Nick Claxton. But where it's not true, the only case where it's not true is signing a restricted free agent to an offer sheet. They need to have that space available when that offer sheet gets signed. And that means that LeBron and Hachimura have to get locked into contracts before they go offer Peyton Watson or Walker Kessler a $30 million annual value offer sheet, which those teams can just match anyway. So that's a lot to ask of LeBron. Hey, lock yourself in at $25 million because we want to offer Walker Kessler an offer sheet. The Jazz may match. It's hard to ask LeBron that unless you know exactly what you're getting for him signing at the number you're asking him to sign for. That's why I think them extending an offer sheet to one of these restricted free agents is highly unlikely. They have to resolve all of their cap holds before they can do that. It is much more straightforward for them to just acquire these players via sign and trade. So I expect any of these three restricted free agents that they want, if they're going to acquire any of them, it's going to be via sign and trade, especially because their teams are motivated to keep them. Just letting them walk for nothing is highly unlikely. So provided LeBron comes in at 25, Hachimura at 17, Ayton opts out, Marcus Smart opts out, they renounce Kennard and Kleba. They're looking at anywhere from $15 to $20 million in cap space. Then they have the $9.4 million room exception they could extend. And at the very end, they give Austin Reeves his max extension and they fill out the rest of the roster with veteran minimums. That leaves the team at somewhere around $200 million, give or take a few million in total salary. Interesting that the Lakers could do all these moves and still end up with a total payroll less than the luxury tax. And that's because they just don't have a lot of money they can add after their cap space is used, aside from the Austin Reeves extension. So this could be one of the first times in a long time that LeBron has played for a team that's not a taxpayer. Let's move over to the over the cap scenario, which I think is their plan B. They want to be able to utilize their cap space to add players. But if they're not able to do that, what they're going to do is hold on to the cap holds for all of these guys. They don't have to resolve LeBron and Rui Hachimura right away. Maybe Ayton opts in. They keep that Kennard cap hold. You reserve the right to re-sign those guys, and then you can involve them in trades. In this case, they would have access to the $15.1 million taxpayer mid-level exception, and that would hard cap them at the first apron. They don't care about a first apron hard cap. They want to stay under that anyway. You cannot be over the first apron and sign buyout guys that were making more than the mid-level exception. Perfect example is Klay Thompson. Mid-level exception is 15. Klay's on a $17, $18 million contract. If he gets bought out, they can sign him. If they were over the first apron, they wouldn't be able to do that. But being a cap space team is more than likely what they're going to do. And so I wanted to lay out here what their sequence of moves more than likely is going to look like. I think that they would prefer to trade their pick in this draft. And so I would expect a trade involving that pick and Vanderbilt and Connect to happen in the next few days. That's acquisition number one. Maybe it involves additional first rounders. Who knows? Maybe it involves additional players. That's how they would acquire their first target. Then they go looking for their second move. Are we going to sign Robert Williams? Are we going to sign Mitchell Robinson? Are we going to trade for Lou Dort? Whatever the move is, that tells them how much cap space they need. And then they go back to their cap holds and resolve all of them. They come to LeBron and say, look, we need you to sign for $20 million so that we can get Lou Dort or whatever. That's how this would work. Then they've used their cap space. They now have their room exception to get a third acquisition. And then at the very end, they sign Reeves to his max. So let's talk about the different scenarios that could happen here. Let's say they do a sign and trade for Kessler. I think Kessler is their primary target, the guy that they would pick over everybody else to acquire. Who knows what Utah would want back in a sign and trade for him. But let's just say, for example, it's Jared Vanderbilt. He was a member of the Jazz before he got traded to the Lakers a while back. The first round pick in this year's draft, and then a distant unprotected pick. Compensation for sign and trades is always tough to figure out. Kessler would be around $30 million, which, by the way, I think is insane for Kessler. I thought the 5 years, $140 that Utah offered him was fair. He clearly thinks he's in the Şengün, Duren range. That's crazy to me. So you're signing trading for Kessler at 30. Between Vanderbilt and the first overall pick, that's around 15 million in money you're sending out. So you need another 15 million in space. As I said, that's about the money they would get if they get LeBron at 25, Rui at 17, and Jackson Hayes at 4.1. So that's what they would do. Then with their room exception, they could sign a guy like Keon Ellis. I think it's very likely that they get Keon Ellis. I don't think Cleveland is motivated to bring him back. And I think 9.4 as a first year salary for him is pretty fair. So if that sequence of moves happens, you're looking at a roster where Kessler is now your fourth best player behind Doncic, Reeves, and LeBron. Hachimura is your fifth starter. Keon Ellis is your sixth man. And then beyond that, you have Laravia, Connect, Jackson Hayes. I like them getting Vucevic, actually. I think they're going for rim running bigs. A skilled big like Vucevic who can do other things would make a lot of sense for them. You could see on the table on the left, LeBron at 25, Rui at 17, Kessler at 30. The placeholders, that gets them to 163.9, which is 1.1 million under the $165 million salary cap. They bring in Keon Ellis at 9.4. The final three spots for veteran minimums. And then the Reeves max extension adds 20.4 million on top of the $20.9 million cap hold to bring him to a first year number of 41.3. And that's the roster you end up with a total payroll of 197.8 under the tax. So that's the sign and trade for a restricted free agent scenario. But what if they want to sign somebody to an offer sheet? Let's look at Tari Eason instead if they wanted to do that. The first trade they could make, rather than a sign and trade, could be to get a big like Daniel Gafford. I think with his familiarity with Luka, his very gettable number in the 17 million range, he's on the books for multiple seasons. He would be my primary target if I were the Lakers. That money fits so nicely alongside the mega extension you could expect from Luka and Reeves' big extension. He gives you everything you're looking for as a starting center. I wouldn't be going after 30 million for Kessler when you could pay Gafford 17, but that's just me. I like Daniel Gafford. But I think they could get him for Vanderbilt Connect and their pick this year. I think the Mavericks would be interested in that. So they do that deal. Then to bring in Eason at 25, remember the numbers of LeBron at 25 and Rui at 17 basically creates around 15 million in space. So to sign Eason to a offer sheet where year one is 25 million, they need to create an additional 10. So they would have to dump Jake LaRavia and they would have to waive Jackson Hayes rather than keep his cap hold on the books. That 4 million-ish cap hold from Hayes plus the 6 from LaRavia gets them that additional 10 million in room. They would then have just over 25 million in room and they could extend that offer sheet to Eason. Let's say he accepts, Houston doesn't match. They then have a room exception. They could go after Keon Ellis again. But if it's not Keon Ellis, I actually think this is how they bring Marcus Smart back. Marcus Smart wants a raise. They can only offer him 120% of what he was making, which isn't near his market value. 9.4 million is near his market value, though. So they could do a multi-year deal with him starting at 9.4. If it's not Keon Ellis, I would expect to see him getting this room exception. They sign Reeves at the end. And here's what their team and their cap table looks like. You can see with those moves for Daniel Gafford and Tari Eason coming in at 25 million, they would be just squeezing under the $165 million cap. Marcus Smart comes in on the room exception at 9.4. They add multiple veteran minimums after that. That would be the offer sheet route, which again, I think is unlikely because if the Rockets match, then the Lakers are basically just looking for where they're going to spend that money instead. I find it hard to believe they're going to resolve all those cap holds without the certainty of what they're going to do with the space that creates. But we'll see. The most likely scenario, in my opinion, is this one. Do the trade for Daniel Gafford, like I said, Vanderbilt Connect and their first pick, and then they trade for Lou Dort. If Oklahoma City is looking to dump Lou Dort, there's really only a handful of teams with the cap space to absorb him. Other than the Lakers, those teams are only Brooklyn, Chicago. Maybe Detroit would figure out how to bring him on. That would be the alternative if it's not the Lakers. You may think they're not going to help the Lakers. They're not going to help Detroit even. I don't think that the front office looks at it that way. I think they're going to be on the hunt in a trade for Dort for a distant first-round pick. I think they would love a 2033 first round pick from the Lakers if they could get it, or even a 2031. I don't think it'll be that hard for the Lakers and the Thunder to come together on a Lou Dort trade. I think it's actually quite likely. So that's how I think they use that 15 to 18 million in space. They use the room exception on Keon Ellis, sign Reeves, and now you're looking at a starting five of Luka, Reeves, LeBron, Dort, and Gafford. Hachimura as your sixth, Keon Ellis as your seventh, with LaRavia and Hayes as your eighth and ninth. That's a very strong 9-man rotation. You leave this offseason with a starting rim running big in Daniel Gafford. You bring back Hayes to be his backup. You bring in that physical wing defender who can hit the three at a reasonable number in Lou Dort, and you bring in a defensive guard off the bench in Keon Ellis. That would be a wonderful outcome for the Lakers and actually realistic. So let's say none of those work out. None of the restricted free agents are available. OKC trades Dort to Detroit or Brooklyn or something instead. The cap space they would create, as I've been saying, is around 15 million. That's the mid-level exception number anyway. So what we're really only talking about is that room exception, that 9.4 million, that player that they would not be able to sign by being an over-the-cap team. That's not the worst thing in the world. They would bring back these cap holds and add players via trade. For example, if they wanted Nick Claxton, rather than take his money into cap space, they could just re-sign Kennard on a 1-year deal and include him with another player or two. Let's say Ayton opts in at 8.1 million. They can bring Kennard back on a $13 million contract for 1 season. You package Ayton and Kennard and trade them for a $21 million Nick Claxton. They could do stuff like that. So this is the approach if they end up with nowhere meaningful to spend their cap space. They make their trade, like I've been saying, to get acquisition number 1. They leave the cap holds unresolved, stay over the cap, and sign their second acquisition using the full mid-level exception. And then if they want to get a third guy, they pursue trades with the guys on their roster. So pretty much the same outcome, but just a different way of getting there. And an example of this would be maybe they make a trade for Herb Jones. Herb Jones is on the books for 14.9 this upcoming season, and then it jumps up. New Orleans may be motivated to move off of him before seeing that jump in his salary. I think they could squeeze a couple of picks out of the Lakers, both in this draft and one future one, in addition to the Vanderbilt and Connect package. And then they could use their full mid-level on a guy like Robert Williams, who's in that $15 million range anyway. So you're basically still coming away with a wing and a big. And like I said, if they wanted to make an additional trade, they would use guys like Ayton and Kennard to get there. They sign Reeves at the very end, and their payroll is much bigger, but they're still adding the wing and the big that they're out shopping for. I left LeBron's cap number here at 59.5 million. I bumped up Hachimura to 20 in this scenario because what if he wants more than 17? Being an over-the-cap team allows the Lakers to pay both him and Rui more than the 25 and 17 numbers I've been using. It wouldn't be 59.5 for LeBron. I would expect LeBron's number to still be 30, 35 range. They could even give LeBron 40 million and still get under the second apron in this scenario. So that's why this whole LeBron needs to take a discount only if they're a cap space team. And that's what LeBron and Rich Paul are going to say too. We're not agreeing to a lower number until you know that you're acquiring players with your cap space that are meaningful. Because we're not just going to take a haircut just so you can pay 200 million for a team that you should be paying 215 for. We want that extra 15. My point in talking through this scenario is his discount is entirely dependent on the other moves they're going to be making. He's not going to take a discount on this idea that he's not worth 40 million. I know he's 42. He's not a mid-level exception player. I see there's fans out there that say, let's just get rid of him, that we'll bring him back at the mid-level at the most, that this team needs to move on. Good luck finding somebody as good as him for your team next year. I understand you want to invest in the future, but you can do that and still bring back LeBron. The Lakers are not going to take a hardline stance with him when it comes to his salary. Again, I think both sides are going to land on somewhere around 25 as a compromise. But if the Lakers operate as an over-the-cap team, they're going to be in a position to pay him as much as 40. And so they're not going to lock in that $25 million number until all the dust settles. One final scenario I want to throw out there. I'm not seeing this anywhere, but we talked about sign and trades for restricted free agents. I wonder if a sign and trade involving LeBron and one of those restricted free agents is possible. Maybe the Nuggets want to swap Peyton Watson and LeBron. They say, we're not comfortable paying Peyton Watson $30 million a year for a guy that we barely saw play at a high level. Maybe we want to swap him and LeBron. They would have to scramble under the first apron, but that's doable. Same with the Rockets. What if the Rockets said, we don't want to pay Tari Eason $25-30 million, but we'll take LeBron for a couple of seasons to pair with Durant and Van Vliet, Amen Thompson, Şengün, Steven Adams. Suddenly that team looks scary. Nobody's talking about either of those destinations for LeBron, and that's probably for good reason. But I just wanted to throw it out there that those are actually possible. Both of those teams are close enough to the first apron that they could make certain moves to make it work. The Rockets could dump Capella. They could renegotiate with Fred Van Vliet with his player option. He can opt out and they can come to terms on a multi-year agreement. The Nuggets can dump Christian Brown on somebody. They can waive Valanciunas. Both these teams could make that work if that became an option both sides were interested in. Just throwing that out there, out of left field. The Lakers are going to get their rim running big. They're going to get their 3-and-D wing. If they play their cards right, they'll get an additional player like Keon Ellis, or they'll be able to bring back Marcus Smart. And that's going to be the return. I don't think they're going to be able to get any of the restricted free agents that they're after, but strange things happen in the NBA all the time. I don't know if that combination of moves is going to be underwhelming to fans or not, that we're expecting to acquire a third star and this sort of full revamp of the roster. But this is what's actually realistic. So expect to see this sort of series of events play out for the Lakers this offseason. But on a closing note, I think it's important to remember what that Dallas Mavericks team looked like with Luka that went to the finals, and to keep in mind that was proven to be a successful model. Luka with the second ball handler, he had Kyrie there, he has Reeves here. Defensive wings and athletic centers and shooters everywhere else. A third star wasn't important to that Mavericks team, and it is likely not important to this Lakers team. Getting contributors that fit the profile is more important than bigger names. So that's what I expect to see out of the Lakers this offseason. So when all is said and done, you see these moves play out and you're not happy with what the roster looks like, don't be calling for Rob Pelinka's head, because this is all that's actually realistic for him to do.